Sometimes I will sit gazing out of a window, Sauvignon Blanc in my hand, swashing it, smelling it. And I'll think to myself, imagine a world. Do this with me. Close your eyes. Imagine a world where the US president knew stuff, things, facts, had knowledge of basic things, right? It would be so cool. And that is not the case right now. Made very clear by the clip that I want to play for you. And then we have a bunch to go through. But we're going to really take some time on this first one because he manages to pack into 57 seconds so much confusion and sort of brain deterioration, as well as obvious deceit. And that's always the question with him. Is he deluded or is he being deceitful? And often I think it's a nice mixture of both. And so here he's going to talk about energy price. He seems to be struggling to think of the word gas prices. So he keeps saying energy prices are down to $1.80 something cents per gallon. A gallon of energy. Which type of energy? I think he's trying to say gas, but he will lie about that, and he'll lie about eggs, and he'll lie about groceries, and some of it seems like he might genuinely believe that the stats he's saying make some sense when they're completely senseless. Okay? So here's, again, the US president saying this. Click the subscribe button, by the way, if you appreciate the show, and like, and all the fun things.
That I was going to get prices down. I did. Energy just hit $1.98 in a couple of states. It's way down. Energy's down, and we're about $64 a barrel. When I came in,
$64 for a barrel of energy.
and we were looking at $89, $90, $95. And by the way, that helps us solve the war too. Having those energy prices is a big incentive for Russia to also agree with solving the war problem. Groceries are down. When I was with you 2 months ago, you were complaining about eggs. I said, I just got here. I was here for about a week when the press started saying about eggs have gone through the roof. I said, I just got here. Tell me about eggs. And they happened. They went through the roof and you couldn't get them. So we just had a big Easter egg hunt at the White House. Thousands and thousands of eggs. And the price was down 87%. So we did a great job.
Literally nothing he said there, at least the conclusions he wants you to draw, are correct. A good piece out of CNN that says, fact check, Trump lies about the price of eggs, groceries, and gas. And this wasn't even about what he just went through there, but he's been doing that list of lies or delusions or brain disintegrations. It says gas, groceries, eggs over the last week. President Donald Trump has lied about the price of all of them. So let's go through it. Gas, or as he called it, energy, not specifying which type. Trump claimed last Thursday that gas prices hit $1.98 yesterday in a couple of states. In reality, not a single state had a average gas price below $2.70 per gallon. And the national average was $3.17 per gallon. And gas prices are currently higher than where they were when Sleepy Joe left office. Maybe some people miss the sleepiness a little bit. Then groceries, he said that they're down. They're not. They're going up, grocery prices. And then eggs, also something that is still higher than where egg prices were on average across the country when Joe Biden left office. That's what I'm saying, folks. You shouldn't kick me out. I said I'll stay, and you don't have to kick me out. But you kicked me out. Now the eggs are kicking your ass. And Trump said that the cost of eggs has come down 93 to 94% since he took office. That's wildly inaccurate. A decline of 93% or 94%. Again, this is the part where I know he's being dishonest. And he probably knows he is. But somewhere in there, he thinks even saying 93% decline makes any mathematical sense. And it doesn't. And it's scary that he wouldn't quickly run the math in his head. Because that would mean, based off of where the average price of eggs are now, that a dozen would be 38 cents. If we saw a 93% decrease from where they were whenever Biden left office. In reality, again, they're higher on average for a dozen of eggs than when Biden left office. Nothing was correct there. Now, moving on, one clip we didn't get to from the cabinet meeting was Trump having an exchange with a reporter who makes a claim saying that the U.S. has a trade surplus with Norway. Trump seems to completely misunderstand what's being asked and responds kind of not nailing the point, and then I'll specify what's going on here after.
We took care of the situation.
There are some, Mr. President,
Yeah, please, go ahead.
The Norwegian statistics are showing that the U.S. actually has a trade surplus with Norway. Are you going to be looking into that and see which of the countries are actually in a trade surplus?
Yeah, well, with the United States, almost everybody has a surplus.
But not in
It's really an amazing,
numbers.
it's an amazing phenomenon. No, there's a surplus of a couple of $2 billion I think you have with us. I congratulate you. That's very good. We got to get a little bit of that for ourselves, maybe. But they do have a surplus. Norway has a surplus.
So there's a lot wrong in that clip. The reporter doesn't seem to be correct when she's saying that the United States has a trade surplus with Norway. Now, you could take some months and if you measure it a certain way, the point is it's a pretty fair trading relationship is the real point there. But what she was asserting, Trump seems to hear wrong or interpret wrong and goes, yeah, that's right. We have a deficit would be the word with Norway. Norway has a surplus with us with trade. But before going further, we have to circle back to this idea that separate from there just being a lot off in that clip, and actually technically we have a trade deficit with Norway, remember that Trump fundamentally misunderstands the very reality of trade deficits and surpluses.
If you take your credit card and you go shopping and you run up a large credit card debt, you're running a trade deficit with all those shops. Now, it would be pretty strange if you then blamed all the shop owners for having sold you all those things. You're ripping me off, you're ripping me off, you're ripping me off, I'm running a trade deficit. That is the level of understanding of the President of the United States. The trade deficit does not represent at all trade policies. It represents spending relative to production or earnings. We call that an identity. I teach it in the second day of my course in international monetary economics. Trump never made it to the second day.
Oof. That's a low blow, Jeffrey Sachs. It's a low blow. Different responses to this. Just utter barfed up nonsense talking about Trump. Imagine the outcry from pundits everywhere if he did it during a debate while being named Joe Biden. True, Trump's misunderstanding of a lot of these concepts would probably, there would be a situation where a bigger deal would be made of it if it had been Joe Biden. Someone else said it must be nice to BS your way through a meeting and not have anyone call you out on the facts. I wish that worked for me in my meetings. Someone else, Brad, said, does he just say shit? Yes, Brad. He does. Someone else said, this is what happens when you turn global trade into a reality show. Every fact becomes a plot twist. And then Ron Filipkowski ending these responses by saying the experiment of having the dumbest person in America run the country continues to be a bad idea. Now, you remember on the Signal Gate controversy, Trump didn't even know what Signal was. And then on much of global trade, he seems just wildly confused. Even how they created the math equation to decide how much they'd be reciprocal tariffing people, but it wasn't reciprocal at all. His understanding of a 94% decrease in egg prices since Biden left office would be so irrational. So it doesn't make any sense to assert wrongfully. You have to imagine some weird conversations happen behind the scenes when his sycophants try to explain these basic concepts to him. And because the word surplus, it's different. This is a different type of surplus, but because that term was circulating in some of these confused takes, and I am a huge fan of The Office, it reminded me of that scene of Oscar coming into Michael's office and trying to explain to his boss what a surplus at a business is. And since we can't play the clips, we're now going to do a dramatic reading of that scene. Jaden as Oscar, myself as Michael. Ready, go.
Here are our final actual costs for this year.
Okay.
As you can see, we did pretty well. So
Yeah, I can see that we did indeed. Why don't you explain this to me like I'm an 8-year-old?
all right, well, this is the overall budget for this fiscal year along the x-axis.
Yes.
Okay, right there.
That's the x.
You can clearly see on this page that we have a surplus of $4,300.
Okay.
But we have to spend that by the end of the day or it will be deducted from next year's budget.
Why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5?
Your mommy and daddy give you $10 to open up a lemonade stand. Okay. So you go out, you buy cups, and you buy lemons, and you buy sugar, and now you find out that it only cost you $9.
Oh.
So you have an extra $1.
Yeah.
So you can give that $1 back to mommy and daddy, but guess what? Next summer...
I'll be 6. Yeah?
and you ask them for money, they're going to give you $9 because that's what they think it costs to run the stand. So what you want to do is spend that $1 on something so that your parents think it costs $10 to run the lemonade stand.
So the $1's a surplus. That's a surplus. This is a surplus.
We have to spend $4,300 by the end of the day or it'll be deducted from next year's budget.
Woo-wee.
We should spend this money on a new copier, which we desperately need.
Okay. All right. I break it down in terms of, okay, I think I'm getting you. Okay, that's it. That's how I imagine. That confusion from Trump is how I imagine concepts are explained to him in the Oval Office. Great job, Jaden. Brilliant as ever. Now, more on this. To specify in case Trump watches this, that is not the same as a trade surplus, which is just the difference between how much we buy from a country versus what they import from us, how much we import from them versus how much we export to them. And that can just mean we have more consumer demand here for stuff that they have than they have there for stuff that we have, which doesn't mean anyone's being ripped off, but it's just a basic economic principle. Maybe we should try to figure out how to explain that in a lemonade stand way for Don. All right. Similarly, here's more of this type of language, inducing a level of concern from people that he even knows what he's talking about.
Asked Trudeau, who I call Governor Trudeau affectionately, but I asked him, why are we spending $200 billion to support Canada, to subsidize Canada? And he was unable to answer the question. I mean, why are we doing that? And I have to be honest, as a state, it works great. As a nation, considering the fact that most of the nation, 95% of Canada, what they do is they buy from us and they sell to us. If we didn't buy their oil, and we don't need their oil. We have more oil than anyone, but we don't need their oil. We don't need their lumber. We don't need their cars. We don't need anything. So I said, why are we doing this? Why are we spending $200 billion?
Yeah, I think it would be impossible to get through to him to explain. You're right. We don't need, we want to die if we didn't have it. We want. For numerous reasons. We want cost, type, etc. We want economically. There's demand for it. And that doesn't mean, I just want to say this again for the new people watching who haven't heard me say this, doesn't mean that we don't implement economic protections when we feel industries need it. But his haphazard, aggressive, extensive, overly aggressive, overly haphazard approach is not how you accomplish those economic goals, because the pain that you're inducing for consumers in the meanwhile is not worth it to people. Now, Tim Walz in his State of the State address as governor of Minnesota had this to say.
And on an hour by hour, day by day basis, the President of the United States has chosen to throw our economy into turmoil. Global markets are teetering on the brink of collapse. Businesses across this country and here in Minnesota are already laying off employees by the thousands. Working people are paying more for basic goods, and if you haven't checked your 401k lately, don't do it. So let's be very clear. None of this had to happen. When the president took office 3 months ago, there was no reason to throw a wrench in the works and destroy decades of work. But if you listen to anything that comes out of his mouth, one thing has become clear. He's just plain confused about how the world really works for working people. We're talking about a guy that slapped a 10% tariff on an island populated only by penguins. It'd be funny as hell if it wasn't true and stupid. It makes no sense to anyone. That isn't servant leadership. It's not any kind of leadership. It's small, it's weak, and it's petty. It takes the awesome power of the federal government and turns it into a crude weapon, wielded by a man who wants to be king. As governor, I will continue to do everything in my power to protect Minnesotans from getting hurt and continue to provide shelter from the storm for Minnesotans.
Yeah, hitting on the confusion, on the economic incoherence, and so many other things that we're talking about here. All right, just to kind of go through a few other really important things here. A reporter asked Trump, are you concerned with the fact that tourism to the United States from a lot of countries is plummeting because of backlash to your policies, which is going to hurt American businesses? Trump says, nah.
On tourism, there's been a steep drop-off in international travel to the United States. It was down 12% last month, down even more from Western Europe. Why do you think that there are fewer people suddenly who want to travel to the United States?
Well, there could be a little, there's a little nationalism there, I guess, perhaps. It's not a big deal, but, with the dollar being where it is, because, China would always fight for having a...
And he goes on to other things, doubling down here.
Work out very
Do
easily.
you think some people are scared to come here because they hear the stories of tourists who are detained for a few days or even a week or two?
No, we treat our tourists great. We're the tourism capital of the world. There's no place like this, and
You're desperately trying to make that not a reality. And in response to Trump saying that we treat our tourists great, Jon Favreau said, sure we do, linking to a headline that says tourists detained by ICE say they were treated like the worst criminal, often when there's zero justification for such detentions. I think I'll stop it there. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. I'll talk to you tomorrow.